You know, it's interesting when you mention the voice actors, of course, is that I never got to meet any of the voice actors until I started going to JemCon. That was where I got to meet them. So, you know, once again, when I was talking about everything being done in such separate places and over distances, I just never got to meet any of those people. And if it hadn't been for JemCon starting up and bringing the actors in, I never would have met them probably. So what we have, I don't know, do we just have questions? We could just start off with some questions or something?
Maybe to your preamble, like you kind of have a good script down of like how you got involved, how you got pulled in. For people who are brand new to this con and don't know
Yeah,
you, just give me
I
that
guess
5
so.
minutes. Yeah,
I keep thinking that everybody's already heard all of this stuff like 100 times, but I suppose I shouldn't take that for granted. Well, let's see. So when I got into writing animation, starting with working at Marvel Productions with Stan on some things, I actually got to do a bit of development with him, and then we ended up doing the Spider-Man series that ran in 1981, 82, and I wrote a couple of those. And then we did Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And so I was into writing animation and then very much into comics, which I absolutely loved, comic book characters. And then I acquired an agent named Candy Montero, or I could say she acquired me, however you want to say it. And Candy was the first agent who was smart enough to think about representing animation writers. And because before that, animation writers, I think, were, well, first of all, we barely existed. And then secondly, we were not viewed as, you know, a valuable asset the way, say, a live action writer was. And she was the first person that was clever enough and smart enough to think about, hey, I could represent all of these animation writers. And so she had what we jokingly referred to as Candy's stable, you know, all of the writers that she represented. And she was the one that made the contact with Sunbow Productions, or probably Sunbow Productions came to LA looking for writers. And there was Candy representing all of these writers. And that was how I found myself writing for G.I. Joe. My story editor was Steve Gerber, and the biggest change that Steve Gerber brought to my life was that he was requiring the writers who wrote on G.I. Joe to use computers. So in order to fulfill my assignment to write this G.I. Joe script, I had to literally go out and buy a computer, which at the time was like a K-Pro 10, you know, had a whopping 10 megabyte hard drive, one of the first hard drives. And I had to buy this computer, learn how to use this computer, learn what software was and how it worked, and learn how to use a modem, which was dial-up at the time, like a 300 baud modem, how to use a modem to send the scripts. And so I had to make this enormous leap into technology just to write for G.I. Joe. So that was a big change in my life, but it turned out to be something that was extremely important later on, because later on I ended up designing computer games. So he was my mentor, my tech mentor, and a wonderful friend. And I ended up writing 5 G.I. Joe scripts. And of course, in the process of doing that, I got to know Joe Bacall and Tom Griffith, and became known to the people at Sunbow. And so one day they had a meeting and they said, we have a show that we would like to have you develop based on some dolls by Hasbro. And so they told me a little bit about this show and offered me some really nice money. And and so of course I said yes, but I walked out of there having come fresh from things like, you know, Spider-Man and G.I. Joe. And I remember walking out of the meeting thinking, boy, this is going to be really soft. I don't know if I even know how to write something that's this soft. But it turns out I did. Now, originally, this was not a half-hour series. So the first iteration of Gem and the Holograms was not Gem at all. It was just M, the letter M. And it was going to be 15 6-minute segments. And one Gem segment was going to run in the middle of this half-hour show that called Super Saturday or Super Sunday, depending on, you know, which market it ran in. And there was a boys action piece, like a 6-minute boys action piece, then a Jem segment, and then another 6-minute boys action piece. So, you know, Jem sandwiched between these two boys action things. And so one of the instructions that I got was, yes, it has to be music and romance and fashion, but there has to be enough action that the boys don't change the dial, because that was their great fear, is that when Jem came on, the boys would turn the dial to something else, you know, literally. I mean, in those days, you didn't even have remotes. You had to go over and change the dial. So, you know, it was like, okay, we want action, but, you know, all this other stuff as well. And of course, it's a very different thing to structure 15 little segments. And if they became repackaged and repurposed once they decide to make it its own half-hour show. Those 15 little segments became the first 5 half-hour miniseries. And I'm sure for those of you who have watched that, you'll notice that pretty much every single act has a real cliffhanger. And that was because of the original structure of those little segments being sandwiched in these boys shows. And that was why it ended up with such a strange kind of a structure to it. And the other thing was that when they decided to convert it to half hour, they discovered that each segment was just a little bit short on time. It didn't quite add up to the time needed, the 22 minutes needed of animation for a half an hour. And so I also had to go back and write like just little tiny sections of something that could then be added to fill it out to the necessary 22 minutes. So it was this whole process, rather interesting process. And of course, I should clarify that it isn't technically correct to call me the creator of Jem, because it was created by Bill Sanders, the toy guy that came up with the original concept. And, you know, he got together with a couple of other people and went and sold it to Hasbro. So, I mean, really, I need to credit him as the creator of the fundamental concept, the underlying concept that ended up becoming Jem. Although he did, I discover, originally design it to be a boy band and a boy property. And I think when they went to Hasbro, Hasbro was looking for something for a girl line probably, and that's how it ended up being converted into girl bands. And technically in the TV world, now we're talking live action, it's the animation, we don't have these rules because the animation isn't covered by the Writers Guild most of the time. You can get it now, coverage by the Writers Guild, but unfortunately, in general, animation, especially this type of animation, was not covered by the Writers Guild. But under basic rules, I would be considered the developer of the series. I was the person who developed it. So I took just basic underlying concepts. You know, here's a rock singer who has a secret identity, and she's got this band composed of, you know, these dolls, and she's got this computer called Synergy, and she, you know, she has these earrings, she can change how she looks, and she's got a boyfriend, and they're going to have this car. So like they had worked out the toy line, and they were still, all the time I was writing these 15 segments, they kept changing the names on me. You know, just about everybody's name changed. I think the only characters I think that didn't have their stage names changed were Pizzazz and Rio. And I think pretty much almost everybody else was going through name changes and instrument changes and things that were driving me crazy. And I had to beg and beg and beg Hasbro just to send me some Polaroids of the dolls so I could try to get some sense of what these characters even look like. But nonetheless, I wrote what's called a Bible, in which I created the essence of the show, you know, what their real identities and real names were, and what their personalities were, how they interacted with one another, what their relationships were. I came up with Eric Raymond, and named after my brother. I used my brother's name for the villain, and came up with the Starlight House and Starlight Music, and the fact that Jerica would be this music executive, and you know, all of that extra, all the extra stuff that to build the series around is what I came up with. And so then we launched into 65 half hours, which was a full run of syndication at the time. It was a standard run of syndication at the time.
And thank you for doing that. We're all here because of that, because you did that. I wonder what you think about the influence of this on people like us, kind of the children of Gem, the people who are attracted to Gem. A lot of the people who are involved in the creation of the concept, like Bill Sanders and some of the voice actors, some of the people who wrote, identify as female or are queer people. Do you think that somehow like is part of the Gem appeal to some of us, is that the creators were people who identify as female or people who are queer?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know. I really have no way of knowing. I mean, I never even knew about the existence of Bill Sanders until probably 20 years later. You know, so that information was never shared with me at the time. You know, there was not something I guess they considered relevant. So I only found out about him like much, much later. But you know, it's an interesting thing, and it's something I've thought about quite a lot. Why does Gem have this particular appeal? And I think it just has a lot to do with the fact that so much of Gem deals with trying to figure out one's identity. You know, trying to figure out who you really are, switching between identities, being afraid of having your, you know, this secret found out. And of course, you know, talking about the 80s when it was, you know, much different time period for someone to be gay, queer, whatever, you know, to try and come out, much more difficult kind of a thing. And so I think that whole searching for identity, searching for who you are, feeling like you have a secret you have to keep, I think all of that translates pretty well into a lot of people's experience.
Yeah, queer or otherwise, really, it's not just a queer thing, right? It's a human thing, and all this kind of the alchemy of all that stuff together, along with the kindness and the altruism that the bands, you know, there was always a twist of that, even with the Misfits, that something they had heart, you know. So I love that. Tell me about, you write for computer games. Have you ever thought about writing a Gem computer game using those characters and putting them into a computer world and letting us play with them there?
Yeah, I certainly toyed with the possibility of doing that, but you know, I would have had to work out or get the rights from Hasbro, and Hasbro, frankly, over the years, never wanted anything to do with me. It was very difficult trying to ever deal with them, so I couldn't think about it very seriously just because of that.
Just create new awesome characters for your games, right?
I'm sorry?
Create new awesome characters for your games. Just go start with a clean slate, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, creating even creating a game, a mobile game is a very complicated process. It's certainly not something I could do by myself. It would require an entire team. So I would have had to go to some company. I mean, I worked at Zynga for 6 years working on first Facebook games and then mobile games. Now, those things are utterly complex, and you'd be surprised at how many people it takes to churn one of those things out, especially since they work on a very tight time schedule. They're the kind of thing where you continuously have to put out new content, and that means you've got teams churning behind the scene to turn out new content. You know, so I would have had to have some kind of backing. I would have needed a company or a team or somebody like that. And just because I knew that it was very hard to deal with Hasbro, I just never seemed like it was enough of could make enough of an effort.
Oh, that makes sense. I think you may have heard the X-Men thing. They were talking about X-Men 97 and then bringing the X-Men back with the same story writers and the same voice actors.
Awesome. That's just amazing. Yeah.
And if for some reason, if Hasbro approached you or whoever the right people were approached you to be part of something, or we pick up Gem where she left off, the day after Bonnie is adopted back by her father, would you do it?
Would I do it?
Yeah.
Did you say, oh yeah, of course I would do it.
And what, do you have any ideas about where you would pick it up right there?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, that episode was written. I wrote it after we knew that they weren't going to do any more Gem. We'd been told that they decided to cancel it at that point. So that was it was a farewell. It was my own personal heartfelt farewell to the show and the series and to the fans. And so I didn't really think beyond that, to tell you the truth. I did, some years later, I did approach Hasbro with a concept and a way to reboot Gem and bring it back and continue it, but they just were not interested.
Yeah, it was that episode just, I don't know if I've told you this before, but it was such a lovely episode to all of us. It was such a lovely way to end. It was surprising to someone who was 8 and didn't know the show was ending that suddenly this seemed like a very obvious end to something that we loved. It seemed like she was saying farewell, and we don't know what's going on in the industry, and there's nothing in the papers about Gem ending, but it's very shocking to an 8-year-old that a show that you love it looks like it's about to be over. But it was very lovingly done, and a lot of us had a hard time watching that episode. Like, you don't want it to be over again. So when you're rewatching episodes, that one kind of stays in its own box, its own place on the side, because it's too emotional to watch. So thank you for all the love you put into that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic that we're in. We're finally together again, somewhat virtually and somewhat hybrid. What have you learned about yourself in the last couple of years? What has been different? What's the same? And what have you learned about your work and your business and your life, as far as priorities and what you want to do and what we should be doing?
Well, I'm afraid that even before the pandemic, my life underwent an extremely drastic and dramatic change in that Randy and I had our home destroyed in the Camp Fire in November of 2018. We woke up realizing that something was seriously wrong, and we lived in the town of Magalia, which was just north of the town of Paradise that got completely wiped out by the fire, and 84 people got killed. But we got an evacuation notice, a red alert evacuation notice. So we had to very hastily cram 6 cats into 6 cat carriers into the car, grab a few clothes, grab a few vital papers, and join hundreds of other people clogging this tiny mountain road, which was the only way to escape. And literally, a drive that usually took maybe 40 minutes took 6 hours of creeping down the road and looking off and seeing the entire ridge going up in flames. And it was a few days, we had to live in hotels. And then after a week or so, we discovered that our house was reduced to nothing but ashes. So all of my original scripts, all the paper copies of my scripts, all of my early scripts and materials, all of my mementos, all of my correspondence, everything we had in the world was gone. Books, games, trophies, memorabilia, everything just utterly destroyed. And we went back and looked through the ashes at one point, and the only thing that survived that fire were a couple of ceramic objects that could undergo that kind of high temperature firing. So we basically lost a year of our lives because we were homeless. We lived in hotels. We finally got into a little tiny apartment, and we had absolutely nothing. I mean, we had to start from complete zero. With every possession that you can think of. And finally, eventually, our cats had to be boarded for like 8 months, which was not fun. And we did finally get another house, moved into another mountain town. For some reason, we just like mountain towns. And tried to rebuild our lives, just starting over again. And then the pandemic hit. So, we were like just barely getting back on our feet. I mean, just barely. And then the pandemic hits. And, but more than the pandemic, that fire, that losing every single personal object, every single physical, pretty much every single physical thing you ever had, radically changed my feeling towards having physical possessions to the point where I kind of don't want to have anything now. You know, we have obviously acquired stuff, things that we absolutely have to have, and some clothing, and you know, a few nice little knickknacks. But it's just radically changed my entire life outlook towards physical possessions, because it can all be gone in a split second. And just we tried to keep things as simple as possible, as light as possible, in terms of not getting bogged down with tons of stuff, because I had tons and tons of stuff. I had, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of comic books. Yeah, probably thousands of comic books, and all the books that we had collected over the years. The one lucky thing is that back in 2017, when we moved to Magalia, I sold 12 boxes of all of my toys and action figures to the Strong Museum of Play in New York. And that included the original Jem doll that my mother bought for me back when the series went on the air, and another Jem doll that I think that a fan gave me that was a, you know, special doll, and all the other shows I worked on, you know, the Conan and Mighty Max, all the other little shows. I had like a whole bunch of different kinds of action figures and action toys and memorabilia. So they acquired all of that. So if I had not sold that stuff to the museum for a collection, that would have all been destroyed too. So that was actually kind of a lucky thing that happened. And hopefully one day they'll have it all up together as a Christy Marx collection. But I was also going to bequeath them all those papers, all those original paper scripts, all the stuff that was written for computer on, you know, just when there's nothing but paper copies. And unfortunately, I can't do that anymore. But so that event, coupled with the pandemic, we just live like hermits. It's pretty quiet. We spend most of our time taking care of the cats. But it definitely has had a major effect on how we feel about life, how we feel about acquiring things, about what's important to us, you know, where we want to spend our time, what we want to spend our time doing. I am more focused on just working on the things that I personally want to work on and care about, rather than I've had an astounding number of job offers, especially in computer games, and pretty much I've turned them all down because I just want to stay focused on doing something of my own. I get some writing done on the, still want to get the Jem memoir done, and you know, have some other things, start writing some books, which I haven't done before. Where I've done a few short comic book stories for Interpop, which is a digital comic book company, a brand new one. The woman who was my editor at DC Comics became the editor-in-chief of Interpop, and so through her, I've been writing a few short stories for them. Some of those, I think they're mostly free to read. If you go to the Interpop website, you should be able to find them.
That's a great tip. Thanks, Christy. Yeah, and all that stuff. Yeah, the fact that you have your life, and you know that you can recalibrate your life, is the most important thing, right? Imagine that you didn't make it out there with you and your cats and your partner. So that recalibration, it's just good to hear that you've been able to do that through that horrible circumstance.
Yeah, it's really not easy. It's not easy, that weird sense of being disconnected and having nothing and starting over, and it is definitely a strange thing to deal with.
I think the Jem Bible was part of that, but you've had copies out there. People kind of gave them back to you, right? You have a version of that still now because you had sold those to fans before.
Fortunately, I had digitized the Jem Bible and all of the Jem scripts, almost all of them anyway, a long time ago, many years back, because people started wanting to buy copies of the scripts, and originally I was literally just photocopying the original hard copy, and it was starting to destroy the original paper version. So I ended up scanning all of that material. So because of that, I still have at least digital copies.
That's good to hear. Nothing, we haven't lost like something like that that's that important. Um, I was going to ask you a couple.
I did just recently reacquire copies of 2 of my Spider-Man and His Amazing Friend scripts from a fan, because I had lost those in the fire, and I didn't think I'd ever have a chance of getting those back again. And just by sheer accident, a few weeks ago, this fan got in touch with me and about something relating to Spider-Man, and it turned out that he had purchased copies of these scripts. It must have been like just ages and ages ago, and he still had these very nice pristine photocopies of these 2 of these scripts that I had completely lost, and so he very kindly sent them to me.
That's awesome. Good fans.
Yeah.
It goes to my next question, actually, and I want people to start thinking on the Zoom and in the room if they have questions for you as well. But what do you find as a common thread or common themes that among your fans, as far as Jem fans or just Christy Marx fans generally?
A common theme. They're all good people. That's the one thing. I have kind of a splintered fandom in general, because I have people who are Jem fans or who are Spider-Man fans, G.I. Joe fans, Transformer fans, but then I also have people who are fans of the video game work, or fans of the live action TV work, fans of the comics I've done. So it's a little bit splintered, but in general, and especially Jem fans, just a bunch of really good people who I think carried forward the positive messages that were in Jem. And it seems to divide amongst people who were inspired to go into some creative field because of Jem, whether it's music or fashion or whatever it is, and people who were helped through a difficult part of their lives because of Jem. I hear that a lot from people who was like, Jem really helped them survive or somehow get through a very difficult part of their lives. And so I think it helped on a number of different levels.
Yeah, and I think some people are in both camps. Even like, I think personally, I think of that for myself. It helped me through a difficult part of my life, but it also inspires a lot of what I do with art, and what I think is fun, what I think is cool, is all related back to Jem somehow, and to the 80s and that stuff. So thank you for that time capsule.
I've told this story before, but when we ran the 2-part episode that dealt with the runaway kids, when I wrote that, I refused to just give it some kind of a sappy, happy ending. I didn't want to sell out by doing that. I felt that the more important message in those episodes were that if you do need to run away, if you do need to get from a bad situation, get help, go to someone who can help you. And unbeknownst to me, they ran a hotline number for runaway kids. They ran a number that kids could call, and they were just flooded. They were buried with phone calls. I didn't know that they were going to do that, but their helpline just was absolutely flooded with calls from kids. And so even at the time, it was having an impact. It was making a difference.
Did you write those PSAs that were part of the episode sometimes?
I did write I was hired to write the little PSAs. Yeah, I didn't come up with the tagline. That was something that they had. Here's the tagline, and here's what we want each little one of these things to be about, and then they handed those off to me to write.
Great. Yeah, that's part of that charitable work. Part of that. I mean, they were real things too at the time. They were real problems that we were dealing with.
Well, you know why they did those? It's because back at the time there were these do-gooder crusaders who thought that children's animation was not good for kids, and that we were just doing half-hour toy commercials, and they were accusing of us all of this kind of stuff. And so there was some legislation that got passed, and as the legislation wanted to sharply define what was the show versus what was a commercial, which is why we ended up with what we call bumpers, those little, we'll be back to Jem in 30 seconds, those little bumpers that happen when you end an act and when you begin an act. Those were happening because of this legislation. And the PSAs were a way of trying to make animation look good, basically. It was, a lot of shows were doing it. He-Man at the time, you may remember, they actually had moral of the story at the end. They like just hit you over the head with that. Now the moral of the story is, and that was just because of this legislation and because of the attitude towards animation at the time.
Oh, thanks for that. I forgot that context about it. These crusaders. Tell us about the Jem movie. You were in the Jem movie. You were Lindsay Pierce. You were gifted a doll by Davide of you as Lindsay Pierce. But tell us about that experience, being part of that, being asked to be part of it, what it's like being on a set, and your part specifically.
Yeah, that did not start out as a very happy experience for me, because I was working at Zynga at the time, still at Zynga, and I suddenly get a phone call from someone at Hasbro, someone who's in the like global PR department or something like that, and she said, "Well, we just wanted to give you a heads up that there's going to be an announcement about a Jem movie." And I said, me being me, I said, "Oh, a Jem movie, great. I hope you're going to let me write it." And there's like this pause. Like, well, no, the movie is about to be made. And so basically, they just blindsided me with something that was a done deal that I knew nothing about. And I obviously wasn't very happy about that. And then they said, "Well, the director, John Chu, would really like to talk to you. Is that all right?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, fine. Yeah, he can call me." And so I ended up talking to him, and I found out the script was fully written and they were ready to go into production. They were just about to start shooting. And so, we had a nice enough conversation, but I couldn't come away very happy from a situation like that, where I had no involvement and was not consulted ahead of time, and was written by somebody who I really don't think understood Jem very well. And I did end up liking John, however. John was very sincere and very passionate about what he was doing. He flew me down to LA. He showed me his whole pitch and presentation that he had gone through to sell the idea to Hasbro. And I ended up liking him a lot. And I thought he was very genuine in what he was trying to do. And because I really liked him a lot, and because I just love being on sets, when he asked me to do a cameo, I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." I used to work, when I began my career, I worked in television production, in the production end of things. And so I was like a production secretary, and I was a liaison between producers and productions. And so I did get to spend quite a lot of time on sets, and it's just a favorite thing of mine. I absolutely love being on sets. To me, I love the energy of sets, well, happy sets. There are unhappy sets and there are happy sets, but happy productive sets are just a really fun, wonderful place to be. During the shooting of Babylon 5, I was there while they were shooting the pilot, and I was there when they were shooting my episode, and just enjoy the energy. I enjoy being around those kind of people, I'm not just talking about the actors and directors, I'm just talking about the crew, all the wonderful people that make a show work, because it's like a family. Everybody comes, if it's gelling well, they all come together like a family. Everybody knows their job, everything, it's just got a lot of energy, and it's just a great place to be. So I was there just for one night, and John did send me some dialogue ahead of time. And I felt that it was, and I said to him, it felt like we were kind of beating people over the head with a 2x4. I thought it was kind of heavy-handed dialogue. I said, "Do you mind if I rewrite it?" And he was like, "Oh, no, please go right ahead, whatever you want to do." So, so I did. And the thing about the dialogue, what it told me was that they didn't really understand what Jem was about. And I think that's what the movie suffered from the most, is they did not really understand what Jem was about, and nobody at Hasbro understood back then. And that's part of the problem that was behind it. The other part of the problem, of course, is that they only had $5 million to make this with. So, we're talking like the smallest conceivable budget you could have, because Hasbro certainly didn't want to put any money into it. So they did the best they could with what they had, but I just felt that they made some very serious mistakes in the script and how they approached the setup and how they approached the characters. And I felt it just did not represent Jem. It was like they made the Justin Bieber movie about a girl, you know, instead of making Jem. So.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. I think the girl properties, they put a lot of money into these boy properties like G.I. Joe and Transformers. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into it, and they could only put aside $5 million for Jem. It's kind of crazy, right?
Well,
But also,
they didn't really want to do it. I mean, John Chu he told me he spent years and years. I forget how many years. I think he said something like 8 years.
Yeah,
trying to talk Hasbro into letting him do something, and I think the only reason they agreed is because Blumhouse agreed to put up, this small amount of money, and so, what do they have to lose? I guess was the attitude.
right. Well, and you ended up writing some for the movie, at least your own lines you got to rewrite, right?
Yeah, well, at least that, yeah.
And they did that weird thing with fans too. They told us that we could like submit videos and that we could write the movie and that we could, but it was all done by the time they involved us. So we didn't get quite as, sideswiped as you did, but it was the same kind of thing they did with the fans. It was kind of like a afterthought, and it was very obviously an afterthought. So it felt like a slap in the face, I think, too, from that perspective. So anyway, a better subject. What's your favorite JemCon memory? I know you've been to a few JemCons. Tell us some of your favorite memories from JemCon.
You're talking to a person that doesn't have a great memory. I really don't. I'm really not a person with a great memory. I mean, things that stand out were the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in Cleveland. That was just really awesome getting to do that and being there and talking to people there and the little Jem display that they had up. I mean, that was very, very cool. And I just had a spectacular time going to Rotterdam. And had so
much fun. A lot of clapping.
So much fun.
Here, the Cleveland crowd's here. Stefan's here. There's a lot of clapping.
Yeah, I mean, I just had so much fun doing that, and I love to travel. And here's a chance for me to see a country I'd never been to, and be taken around and treated to all of these wonderful sites, and smoke some nice dope, and and I had a really spectacular time. And some of the cosplay is always fun. I mean, the cosplay is always just amazing, and people do really amazing things with the cosplay. And I loved the one year that we had a bearded Jem as our winner. He had this awesome costume and these spectacular legs and a beard, and he just looked great though. And I made a great Jem, and just a lot of fun with the cosplay. That's always something I've enjoyed. And getting to meet the actors, getting to meet the voice actors, and getting to meet people that worked at Hasbro, and getting to meet these people that I never got to interact with before, has always been a highlight too.
Yeah, they've all been cool. All of our guests have always been really cool, I think, too. And they all are same vibe somehow. There's some kind of similar frequency we all operate on. So I love that part about it. Anyone on the internet or in the room want to ask Christy a question? Now's the time.
And I have to say too, that one of the things that really struck me, because when I first started going to JemCons, there were like maybe 100 people would show up. But one of the things that has struck me every time I've gone is just been the warmth and the love and the emotion from the fans, from the people that show up. That's just always been spectacular.
And we have new people too. I think that's great that like younger people are here every time. We have new people, so it's not the same 100 people or whatever.
It keeps. That's the other thing that's really been amazing to me over the years is I keep hearing from people who are introducing Jem to their kids, or I hear from, say, a 16-year-old who just discovered it through YouTube or something like that. And even though it's aged and obviously the music's outdated, the fashions are outdated, the tech is outdated, but the stories still work. The characters still work. And that's the power of story. It's not just about the music or the fashion or what kind of technology they have, but it's about the characters, what the characters mean to one another, what the characters mean to us, what the stories have to say to us. And obviously it's still working because I'm hearing all the time about kids who are discovering it and still love it.
Yeah, it transcends the era in which it was represented and made. That story really does help it do that, and the vibe and the energy. So, Amy, I see you're first.
Yep. Hey, thank you so much.
Hi,
So
Amy.
much for coming back and coming back and coming into the panel with us. There's a question about the Misfits. We have an origin story for the holograms, obviously, like how they come together. That is the core. And then later on, we get the origin of the Stingers because we have the whole music video with "It's a Hard, Hard Life." It's a Hard, Hard Life, and then Riot's Hope, obviously. But the Misfits, they just kind of like they're kind of like the bad girls, and they're the opposition for the holograms. But do we get like a real, like, how did they form? What happened to bring these three together?
That's a really good point. And I have never actually thought about an origin story for the Misfits because it was never needed. It was like, again, remember that we're dealing with these 15 6-minute segments. And the reason things are just jammed in there up front is because I didn't have time to do anything else. I didn't have time to try and, I didn't even have a half an hour to try to develop out this stuff. I just had to like jam as much as I could into it, like right up front. And so there really wasn't time to sit back and think, oh, gee, how did the Misfits can I show anything about how no, because they weren't the focus, obviously Jerica and Jem and those characters, were the focus. And so it was just like they existed. The Misfits existed. They were already there. They were already a group. They were just ready to go. And I never really had to worry about where they came from. Never really came up as an issue. So I never really, I didn't take the time to think about it because I didn't need to. It wasn't a priority.
Okay. I think that's really cool. And it wasn't my question. It was from one of my friends in Discord, and I was like, I can answer that question.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay.
That's an awesome question. So I think that's really cool that you hadn't thought about it, but okay. I like it. I feel like it. Thank you so much. I mean, and the dynamic between those three characters, the three main girls, because you have Stormer, who's kind of the soft-hearted one. Roxy, she's just rough and tough, and like Pizzazz is number 2. And I like the way they interact, and they are a family, which I think is a really big theme with Jem and the Holograms, period. There's different ways to form a family. It's not always blood. And so when you come to the Misfits, there's this idea that like they're so different, but at the end of the day, they're like this. Like you're not gonna like, I don't know, you're not gonna come between them too hard. But thank you so much for that.
All right.
Thanks, Amy. I think that's a good idea for a fan fiction contest next year, maybe the Misfits origin story. Next up, we have LM on Zoom with a question.
Hello, Christy.
Hello there.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, of all the Gem episodes you've written, which one are you most proud of?
I'm proud of. I guess it would kind of be a tie between the awards one and that's a toughie. That's like, what is your favorite? Who's your favorite child? I mean, I really liked what we did with the music awards, but I also really liked a lot of the stuff we did with the talent search, and I also loved the very last episode.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I guess proud of it be the music awards.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Where are you calling from?
Scotland in the United Kingdom.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
Good to see
you. Thanks, Christy.
Next question is a Zoom question, then we have one in the room. Christian Wright, you're next.
Well, yeah. Given the confirmed ties between the Gem and the original G.I. Joe series, do you think that either Eric Raymond or Tech Rat were working for Cobra?
No, I never really saw any connection between those two universes.
Well, put that one on the list, Mr. Watson, for the paint slides.
But that's
Okay.
because remember that in both animation and especially in toy development, boy toys and girl toys never meet. I mean, nowadays maybe it may be a little bit changed, but back then when we talk about silos, there was, girl toys are in their own silo, boy toys are in their own silo, and they did not interact, period. That was just not how toy companies worked. All right, so let's see. Okay, you said you
Okay, sorry.
question somebody there.
Yeah, it's free.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ellie.
Hi there.
My question is, I wanted to know if you could remember any situation where Hasbro told you, or they had a toy or a concept that they said you need to work into the show, and your first reaction was, how in the world am I going to do this?
That was my first reaction to the entire concept of the series, but not any particular character or anything. No, I mean, it was a little bit weird in that they wanted me to introduce the Rockin' Roadster right up front. And so I had to just like jam this Roadster into a scene where it made no sense at all. But, for toy purposes, it had to be there. So I had to do that, but it was just part of the challenge of doing a show like that. And I certainly didn't have any trouble with new dolls that they wanted to turn into characters or anything like that. That was all just fun to do. Let's see. The one thing where I kind of bumped up against a problem was when I created the character of Tech Rat. And my original take on Tech Rat is that he was androgynous and that we wouldn't know for sure whether this person was male or female. I wanted it to be kind of a mystery, have this very androgynous kind of character, and they just could not cope with that at all. So Tech Rat had to be male.
Thank you very much.
Allie was our fan fiction contest winner, so she had a bunch of concepts to cram into a fan fiction. So she's asking partially as a fellow writer.
That's the reaction I had when they gave me the list of requirements for the story.
Oh, okay. And of course, there was one character I developed named Graphics that I never got to even write anything for. I mean, I never even got to use her in anything because I think they just I think they dropped the doll from the doll line or something. So I never got to do anything with her. Hello.
Hi, Christy. Good afternoon. It's always such a treat to have you here at JemCon.
Thank you.
I was going to ask what gives you hope as we discover a new generation finding the universal appeal of Gem.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard all of that. So what?
She's asking about what's giving you hope about the new crowd of people, the young people finding Gem, like why that's good.
Why I think that's good is because I think that Gem, I think one of the important things about Gem is that it was full of positive messages. You know, you had characters that behaved in ethical ways and characters that didn't, and there were shades of gray. It wasn't just, you know, black and white, but Gem throughout was supposed to have positive messages, and I think it did. And I think the fact that it's still communicating to so many kids and new generations just indicates that those messages are still valid, and those messages are still getting across and still getting out there, and a younger generation is responding to those messages. And I think that's very important and very hopeful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. Interesting. One more in the room.
Hi there.
Hey there.
Hi, so I've been watching Gem since I was a little kid. It was my first introduction to punk music and the cool music scene. And even when I was a little kid, I was like, wow, this show is pretty hardcore. You know, the misfits are running around committing crimes, and you know, there's really cool bands, and there's you know, all kinds of extortion and blackmail and things going on. And then when I turned 18, I started booking bands for a punk club and went back and watched Jem, and I was like, wow, this show is a lot more hardcore than I really even remembered it being. And so my question to you is, what didn't you get away with? Was there something that they said no to?
There was something they said no to. I wrote an outline for an episode I really wanted to do about a boy having to deal with an alcoholic father. And I really wanted to deal with that issue of, you know, how alcoholism affects a kid. You know, I wasn't, you know, and I had worked out the whole storyline for it, and they just felt it was too, I'm not sure, too something, just too much. They didn't really want to have to deal with. For some reason, it was okay to deal with a drug issue where drugs are bad, and yet for some reason they didn't want to deal with alcoholism. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. They said to me if I wanted to really soften it up, you know, or lighten up what I was trying to tell, and I said, what's the point? You know, if I can't tell the story I want to tell, there's not any point. So just ended up not doing it.
Oh, thank you so much for answering my question. Appreciate you being here.
I have some visitors who want to say hi to you. These guys.
Hey, two of my favorite people. Hello. I wish I could be there to hug you guys.
Yeah, we miss you. We miss you a lot. Yeah.
You're dressed very conservatively there. I don't know. Except for the shoes.
I also have a question for you. As you had to write storylines with the play sets, like the Rock and Roll, the Rondol Roads, the KGM studio, did they ever ask you to write a story about the waterbed?
About what?
The waterbed. That there was a new wave waterbed.
There was a waterbed?
Yes,
the waterbed.
I never heard of this. You're kidding me. There seriously was a place with a waterbed, because I have never heard of this, and I never saw it in any of the stuff they sent me. I never saw anything about that. That would have been hysterical.
That's on your keyboard. Yeah. That's your question.
Yeah.
I had a waterbed once.
Great. Thank you, guys. We're going to go back to the internet. Philip, you have a question. Come off mute.
Hello. Hi, can you hear
Hey
me?
there.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy. I'm Zooming from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to personally thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for just writing these wonderful characters. And I've been a fan of Jem, Transformers, and G.I. Joe. And really, I just really enjoyed, especially those two-parter episodes where you got the chance to really delve into the characters. And my question is, after you wrote an episode and then handed it off to Sunbow, did you have any control over what happened after? Like once it reached Wally Burr and the recording sessions, were you ever at any of the recording sessions to kind of keep an eye on what Wally's vision was, or after you had written the stories, was it pretty much out of your control and then it was handed off to Wally?
Yeah, once the script left my hands, that was it. That was the end of my interaction with it. I don't know if you were on earlier or not, but I talked a bit about how we were all very spread out geographically. And I did you hear any of that, or did you come in just at the beginning of?
I joined a little bit late. Yeah,
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'll go back over it just a little bit in case other people also weren't there. But basically, during production, we're all very spread out geographically. I mean, Sunbow was in New York, so you know, the people that worked for Sunbow were in New York, and a lot of the music and so forth, I think, was done in New York. And then I lived in this little mountain town that was about an hour and a half drive to get from where I lived down to LA. And then the studios down in LA where the storyboard people were and were, maybe I forget where they even did the voice work. So I was isolated from everybody else. I was dealing with writers mostly on the phone or maybe a little bit through some computer communication, but we didn't have email, but it was all separate. So I would turn in a script and that was the end of it. That was pretty much the last I would see of it. And I didn't interact with any of the actors or any of the storyboard people or any of the production people at all. I pretty much did everything by phone, phone or actual mail or courier or something like that.
I just find it's fascinating because at an earlier session, Samantha alluded to what's the secret sauce. And there are just so many different elements. And of course, it all stems from the writer because you're faced with a blank page. And without the writer, there's nothing. There's no story, there's no character, there's no nothing. So again, thank you so much for starting it. And
that's true. That's true. Yeah. It is true that it does start there. But without all of these other amazing talents, it also just ends there and it's just words on a page. And I think one of the magic things about Gem is that it was just an amazing confluence of talent, all different kinds of talents. All of the writers that we had, all of the people that were doing the art and the design and the people that did the voices and the people that did the music. And it was just an amazing, probably once in a lifetime coming together of all of these talents in a way that just worked, just absolutely worked.
I agree. I find it fascinating. Thank you again.
Thank you, Philip. We have another question in the room. Somebody you may recognize, Christy.
Hello.
I have a question. I wonder what was the origin of Gem from Jericho's point of view. There's no mention, of course, in the first episode it was cramped for time, but later on it would be fun. Have been fun that either Jericho wanted to be a rock star when she was young, and then maybe that their father had the nickname Gem, something like that. So I just wonder if you thought about something, because at the end they say, I have an idea when after she met Synergy, and then pop, we have Gem. Of course, I think Gems appeared because Jericho wouldn't be involved doing the contest with the Misfits, and also be the 50% owner of Starlight Music. I think to avoid some kind of conflict, she had to be two separate characters. But it's just between she met Synergy and I have an idea, and then pop, Gem arrives. Of course, the first episodes were crammed and it's quite okay. But maybe later on, it would have been fun to say, well, when I grow up, I want to be a superstar. And maybe his father said, well, my little Gem, one day will maybe happen. It's more a reflection that I think that the question, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, when I was writing all of those initial segments, she wasn't called Gem. I mean, she wasn't called Jerica. She started out as M, just the letter M. And the character's first name was, trying to remember the sequence. She was Misty, and then she was Morgan, and then finally I was like partway through writing these when the word came down, well, we can't trademark the letter M, or the letter M doesn't work for some reason. So now she's called Gem, and I'm like, oh, but that's not as good as M. M could stand for music and mystery and all this. They're like, no, it's got to be Gem, and she's now called Jerica. Or no, I think she had some other name first that started with J, but anyway, and then eventually she ended up being Jerica. So when I was initially putting everything together and thinking about the whole series up front, I didn't think about Jem. You know, why was she called Jem, or where would the name Jem have come from? Because it wasn't really a part of my initial thinking. And it was something that was introduced very suddenly later in the process. So I didn't really have time to sit back and think about that, you know, try to come up with anything for that. It was, you know, it was too far along in trying to get the stuff done. And it was just thrown at me kind of last minute. Now there was one episode called Out of the Past, which was, though not written by me, I ended up working because it dealt so much with the childhood of Jerica that I ended up working very, very closely with the writer on that, and did some rewriting on it myself. And we delved a little bit into what made her the kind of person she was, and, you know, a little bit more about the parents and that background and so forth. But, you know, it wasn't something I thought about up front, so it never really came up again later on.
Well, that's fine, and really appreciate what you've done with the series. And of course, like you said, it was a whole team, a very once in a lifetime cooperation. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
One more person who wants to say hi to you, Christy, over here. Raven.
Hello.
Yes, just as always, we are so thrilled to have you with us, and it's exciting to be here, exciting to have you, and I just wanted to say hi.
Hello.
And you can see the crowd, Christy, here. Everyone say hi, be quiet.
Look at all them people. Hello.
Beautiful people. And I have one more question online that's going to close it out and give Christy her time back. So Carl Lewis, you have the last question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi there. So
Good
where
evening.
Are you calling from?
Good evening from Portugal, Europe.
Portugal, all right. Man, we got Scotland, Portugal, we got Netherlands represented. We're going here.
the entire world. Christy, thank you so much for your work on Jam. I am a Portuguese independent musician, and I believe watching Jam since I was a kid was really, really important to make me believe I could pursue such a difficult and challenging professional life.
Excellent.
Yeah, I have a question connected to the music in the show. I don't know exactly your involvement in the music, but of course you said a little ago that, well, all the elements and all the really talented people working in every aspect of Jam made it what it is. That is truly outrageous until today. And some of the elements that I think that were more important to me is the sensitivity, the emotions, and also the fact that there's a family where the music is present in the family, like Jerica and Kimber. And because I always sing with my sister, my grandfather used to play the traditional Portuguese guitar from Fado. It's our traditional music from Portugal. So I believe what connected the most in my heart watching Jam was this thing about music being a really positive side of conveying emotions in a happy family, you know. And I even today I always try to think what's that little thing most special about Jam for myself, and I believe that it's that. So my question is, what's your involvement, if any, in the music part? You could give some ideas for the music videos or for the lyrics. That's my question. Once again, thank you so much, and a big hi to everyone. Okay.
Yeah, the way it worked was that as I wrote the scripts, I would put in a paragraph that was like, you know, music video here, here's what I want it to be about. I might give like a little bit of an idea for things that could be that not that I was trying to write lyrics, but just thoughts and ideas that a lot of times got turned into lyrics, and what I wanted, a rough idea of what I wanted the visuals to be. I didn't like going to like an excessive amount of detail, but just enough to give the storyboard artist a sense of what kind of visuals should be on the screen, and enough to give the people who are writing the lyrics and the songs a sense of what was the song about, what was the, you know, what kind of ideas or thoughts or emotions, you know, did I want to get across. So that usually was like a chunky paragraph within the script.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for being part of this. It's been great, Christy. Always great to have you. You are the creator, you know, ish, and I know you're correcting me on that, but
creator-ish, I like that.
Ish,
Creator-ish, developer,
and yeah,
whatever.
and the person who gives us all this love for JemCon and helps us keep together. So thank you for being with us once again. We'll hope to see you again soon, maybe in person one day. And we all love you very much.
Yeah, I hope so. I really want to get back to being able to interact with people, you know, one-on-one, because I love that.
Thank you again. Claps.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Christy. We love you.
You take care, everybody.